Hello, it's Mrs. McCullough again. We are in our second lesson in this series about how readers compare texts. And remember, when we're doing a comparison, it's always with two texts. And so I told you that adults have this saying when it talks about comparing. They say it's like comparing apples to oranges, meaning they're very different items, but they have some similarities. And that's what we're doing when we're talking about the texts that we read. We are going to look for places that they're similar or the same. But there's an order in which we have to go about doing this. We have to list the details from our reading voice, the details in the text, and then we can also list some of our thinking voice thoughts that we might be having as well. We do all of this from the first text, text A. And we use our Tchart to help us organize the information. So all of text A, the details and thoughts, would go here on the left-hand side. Then, second step is you read text B and you list those reading voice details and any of your thinking voice thoughts. And so you have to do it in this order. Text B would be second, and they'd be organized over here. Now, the real benefit of using a Tchart like this is all about the middle portion. The middle portion helps us group information together. How did you know that detail needed to go right in that spot? It's because it's part of this group. It's part of this category. So the third step here says to group related information or info that fits text A and B. And then the fourth step is to label the categories. Now, I gave you the categories last time, just as we were getting started, so that we could figure out how to even use this Tchart. Eventually, you might make up your own categories, but today's lesson is all about the categories you need when you're doing literature. That's what today's lesson is all about. It's about actually knowing exactly which categories or groups you would have here in this label. Okay, how do you know what to put in here? It's a secret. Oh, it's not that big of a secret, but I'm going to let you in on it. Okay, whenever you're reading stories, any type of fiction, then there's always the same middle categories. You know what they are? The story elements. I know, all of the things we've been talking about. The character who's in the story, a little bit about the character's motivation, what he really wants to happen. Yeah, those are the things that you'll find down the middle. Guess what? The setting, the where the story takes place, but it could also be the when, especially if that's important, okay? Then we've got the problem. Remember our flag? What is the problem? So you're going to have some sort of problem and then the solution, okay? The solution in the plot summary. Now, you could have some of the trials and tribulations listed in the plot summary as well. They'll really be all three of these things kind of combined in that plot summary. What's the problem? What they do to try to fix it? How was it actually solved? Okay, but there's one more thing that we've learned about that goes beyond just story elements. You know what that is? That's the theme. That is the message that the author teaches me. So if you'll look at my Tchart that I have here, this is the one that you'll always use when you're doing literature. Yeah, the character setting, the plot summary with problem, event, solution, and then the theme or the message, the lesson. And so I've got all of these listed here on our document so that you can see where those things fit. And then you would do all of the same thing for text B as well. So let's try this out. Let's try this specifically with two literature stories, two narrative stories. And I wanted to choose something that almost everybody already knows. And so we're going to use The Wizard of Oz and Finding Nemo. Now, wait, what? I know. Don't those seem very different? It's like comparing apples to oranges. Two completely different stories. They're not by the same author. They don't have the same characters. They're not even the same version of or a different version of the same story. Yeah, no, completely different. We're going to compare apples and oranges. You ready? So, what do we have to do when we're comparing text like this? Step one, what is it? List details and thoughts from text A. Okay, so we're going to use text A. We're going to use the Wizard of Oz first. And then what kinds of details are we collecting? What would be the categories when it's a story, when it's narrative? Story elements. And so that's what we're going to pay attention to. So let's do this. So who is in The Wizard of Oz? Who's the main character? Dorothy. Now, the main character is the one that I always try to note. What's the motivation? What did she really want? And here it says Dorothy wants to get home. But there were other characters that played some supporting roles. There was Toto, her little dog. The whole reason why she got into this mess was because Toto was going after Miss Gulch. And Miss Gulch was going to take Toto away. And Dorothy was going to run away from home. And then there was a tornado. Like all those things that happened, right? Toto plays a big part in this story. Then there was the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, the Cowardly Lion, the friends that helped her. And then there was Miss Gulch, who, when Dorothy was dreaming about Oz, was actually the Wicked Witch of the West. Did you know that? Yeah. And so those are some main characters, but I like to know who's the main character. List that one first. What did she want? Okay. Now, what was the setting? Well, you might want to just focus in on one setting, but in this story, it starts in Kansas, and then she goes to Oz. There's a big portion of it in Munchkin Land, and there's another big portion of it in Emerald City. And then setting, remember, can also be time, and this went over several days. They don't really tell us a year or anything like that, but that's enough for setting, okay? So what's next? We got to have some sort of problem, events, solution. So all three of these kind of go together, okay? So she was stuck in the land of Oz. She was trying to get home, but she also had to stay away from the Wicked Witch of the West. So then when she taps her heels together, it was all just a dream. Okay, so now, what was the theme? What lesson did the author really teach us? Well, there's not always just one theme. Remember, we learned that last time. So there are a couple themes, like home is the best place to be, or true friends will help each other, because the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, the Cowardly Lion, they did whatever they could do to make sure that Dorothy could get home, right? Even though they would miss her, they knew that's what she wanted with all her heart. And then good always triumphs over evil. So she did outwit the Wicked Witch of the West. Okay, so we did step one. We listed details and thoughts from text A, and we know what our categories are. They are the story elements. That's right. So now we've got to do step two. List details and thoughts from text B. So let's go back to Finding Nemo. And thinking about Finding Nemo, then we know that there was a main character, Nemo. And what did Nemo really want? Well, he wanted to get home after he was kidnapped by the dentist, remember? Fishnapped. And so were there any other characters? Well, let's look at our next sheet here. Yeah, Marlin and Dory, they were looking for Nemo. And then Gil and the tank gang, they were really helping him get out. And then there was the dentist and Darla. Just like we had the Wicked Witch of the West, we had the evil villain, Darla. Poor girl, she was misunderstood, but we did not want Nemo to go home with Darla. Remember that? Okay, so now we've got to look at the setting. So where did this take place? Well, the main setting, you could say just ocean and dentist office. You could. But specifically, there was the Great Barrier Reef where it all started. Then the dentist office was in Sydney, Australia. was in the ocean, and specifically the ECA. Remember that? Oh, no, actually, it was the EAC. I'll fix that. It was the EAC, remember? And then it happened over several days. Okay, so we've got setting underway. How about the problem? What was Nemo's problem? What were some of the events and that solution? So let's look at what's here. He was stuck in that dentist office and he needed to get home. We also had to keep him away from Darla. And so there was another kind of storyline in this where Marlin and Dory, they kept looking for Nemo. And in the end, how was this solved? Gil helps Nemo escape through the drain. Okay, so what kinds of themes or lessons could be learned from Finding Nemo? Well, Nemo was trying to get home. Home's the best place to be, even if he does have a worrywart dad. And true friends really help each other because Gil and the tank gang, they helped him get out of that office, remember? And good always triumphs over evil. So we didn't want him to end up with Darla, and he didn't. Okay, so see, now we did the hard part. We did the listing and the grouping, and we already knew what our labels were. But you're not done. When you're comparing like apples to oranges, what you have to do is you have to think about how are they similar. Maybe not exactly the same, but similar. And so let's look at some of these things. Notice how they turn pink. So The Wizard of Oz and Finding Nemo are similar because both main characters are trying to get back home. Yeah. Now, for setting, it takes several days for them to concoct a plan so they can actually get home. The Wizard of Oz and Finding Nemo are similar because both characters are trying to stay away from an evil character, from the evil antagonist. In the Wizard of Oz case, it's the Wicked Witch of the West, while Nemo is trying to stay away from a little girl named Darla. And then the Wizard of Oz and Finding Nemo, they have the same message or lesson to be learned. These both have the same message that home is really where we want to be. Or they have a similar lesson to be learned that good friends will always help you get what you want and need, even if it means they're going to miss you. Okay, so that's just an example of one case of comparing two literature stories, two narratives where they are very different, but we're looking for how they're similar. It's like comparing apples to oranges, remember? Okay, so now let's have you try this out. Remember when we were doing these two stories, A Bad Case of Stripes and After the Fall? We've done so much work with these stories. You should know them really well. Okay, so what are we comparing? What are we really collecting here for the categories? We're collecting the story elements. And what would be the first one? Character. Okay, and not just character, but also what's that main character want? What's his motivation or her motivation? So let's look at this. So we've got all of our different story elements here. And so here are some things that were collected. Who was the main character? Camilla. And what was it that she wanted with all of her heart? Well, she wouldn't eat lima beans because she was afraid that the other kids wouldn't like her. Now, are there any other characters in this story? Parents, the kids, the doctors, the old woman. But, they didn't play as major a part, but you can list them if you want. Okay, now you need to try the next one. What's the setting for this story? Where did it take place? Maybe when did it take place? Mainly at her house, yeah. And a little bit at where? School with the other kids. Now, do we have a date? Did it all happen in one day? No, it happened over several days, okay? So maybe that'd be similar to The Wizard of Oz. Now, I want you to really think about the plot, okay? What was her problem? What was happening? How did it get fixed? Okay, you think about it. Now say it in your own words. Yeah, good. Okay, so problem was she had a bad case of stripes. And she kept changing every time somebody would say something. Who tried to help her? Doctors, and the old woman. But what finally made her get back to normal? She ate those lima beans, which she really wanted. Okay, so, and this says something similar to that. Okay, good job. Now, what could have been some of the lessons? We did work on this. So what message did we learn? Yeah. Do what's right. Don't worry about what other people think. Something like that. Okay, so there's a couple different ways to say this. Be true to yourself. Do what you feel is right. Don't worry about what other people think. Okay, so there's not one right theme, but all of those really fit a bad case of stripes. Okay, so now let's have you try after the fall. Who's the main character? Humpty Dumpty. Now, what did this character want? He wanted to go up on the wall, but he was afraid, right? Because accidents happen, okay? Now, was there anybody else in this passage? No, there were no other characters, and that's fine. You don't have to list a whole bunch. What about the setting, okay? Where did this take place? Yeah, at home and his wall, right? What about time? Do we know any time? No, not really. Was it one day or several days? Several days? I agree. Okay, so now, what was his big problem? Yeah, he wanted to be on that wall, so he wanted to be near the birds. Then he lost his plane. Yeah, that was his big problem. And so he climbed up, and what happened? Yeah, then he turned into a bird and he flew away. So that would be some of the things that you might list. Yeah. Okay. So now what could be the lesson learned here? What could be the lesson from after the fall? That was part of your homework. What did you decide? That maybe Humpty Dumpty had to do what he felt in his heart was right. Maybe he had to face his fears. Yeah, those were all the things that he kind of had to do. So how could we say that as a theme statement that would be more global, that would be about people? And there are some of these theme statements that look familiar. Be true to yourself. He really wanted to go up on the wall. He needed to do that. Do what you feel is right. Even though he was afraid, he felt like he should be up on the wall. Don't be afraid to take chances, right? He needed to take a chance. Even though accidents could happen, he needed to get up there. Okay, so we've done this. We've done a great job of listing details, all from text A, listing details, all from text B, and really grouping them by the category. And whenever it's a story, we always group them by the story elements, okay? Good. That's what I really want you to remember. But we don't stop there. When we're making comparisons, we have to start to compare apples to oranges. So we know that these are two totally different stories, but how are they similar? Now you think about it. Look back at our details. How are they similar? Okay, look at Camilla and her motivation. Look at Humpty Dumpty and his motivation. They both won't do something because they're afraid of something else. Oh, let's start to look at some of these. So Camilla won't eat lima beans because she's afraid that kids won't like her. And Humpty Dumpty won't go up on the wall because he's afraid that an accident will happen. So both of these characters really want something bad, but they deny it. They deny it to themselves. Oh my goodness. Did you ever notice that these two totally different stories had similar character motivations? Did you ever notice that before? Yeah, you see, that's why we have to really use this Tchart to help us look across, because all of a sudden things pop out that we never even noticed, like comparing apples to oranges. Two totally different things, but they're similar. All right, so some other things that we see, they both take place at home over several days. And then look at the plot. How do they fix it? When Camilla gets what she wants by eating lima beans, then she changes back into herself, which is what she wants. Look at this. When Humpty climbs up on the wall to get what he wants, which was that plane that was stuck up there, then he changes into a bird, which is what he loves anyway. Oh my goodness. And so there are some of these theme statements that are exactly the same, but look down here. Don't worry about what other people think. Don't be afraid to take chances. Now, those sentences aren't exactly the same, but they're similar because it's all about the worrying or being afraid, okay? That we need to do what we know is right, even if we're scared. Okay, guys, this was fantastic. You're going to be so good at the assignment. Let me tell you about the assignment. Remember when we were doing some retelling and we were looking at story elements and things, and I had you go back and read some text. And I told you you could choose Cinderella or you could choose Aladdin. I told you could have either one, okay? So now we're going to go back to those. And you can reread, you can have them read to you, but you're going to have to read text A, and guess what? Collect the details for text A. And how do you know what categories they go in? It's by the story elements. That's right, the story elements. Then you're going to read or reread or listen to text B, and you're going to list all the details and thoughts about text B. Okay, and remember, you're going to collect all the story elements. That's right. Then, after you've collected it, you're going to look across and see if you can find any similarities. And, maybe you just highlight it or mark it, whatever you want to do. But I want you to kind of look across and see if you find any similarities from these two totally different texts. There might be something you never noticed before. And we've got another option for you. If you're used to using Google Docs, we have it available for you as a Google Doc. Now, it does save you only, so remember that you always go to File and you make a copy. And when you make a copy, then you can type right in here, okay? And you can type all about the main character and the setting and the plot and the theme. And then look across to see, do you find any similarities that maybe you didn't notice before? That would be your assignment if you were in Mrs. McCullough's class, but your teacher might have an even better idea.